those of you who are here have passed test number 1. Show up. Just like, I will give you a you down. Very proper. Right. Second thing is, it kind of reminds me, in the early days of Theodore Adorno, who we'll get to later on, he was quite a radical thinker. Anyway, when he fled from Frankfurt to New York, he fled from the Nazis. He's going to sign this out. Gave a little floor there, which all good. I'm sorry, that is a little bit awkward, that page, isn't it? Sorry about that. I think he's okay, yes, this is attendance challenge. Okay, anyway, he fled the Nazis, for obvious reasons. And when he went to New York, he started teaching his students, and he's, very important to be radical, it's very important to fight against authority, and learn how to say, you can do it, and get past the no, and all the rest of it. So when there was a lot of student revolution going on, all of his students were at the center of it, and they decided to boycott his classes. He was so angry. He couldn't believe that the radicality that they took on was in his class. Yeah, that he got so angry that they were all protesting, and so he called the police on them. Okay, it gets worse. They were so angry that they came marching into his office, like, you are not really a radical person, and like you're a horrible person, and he had a heart attack and died. It's fantastic. I mean, I don't like that. Again, death. That would make it's like, Okay, we're not ready to begin yet, so this is the beginning. This is pre the beginning of the beginning. Luke, do you want to explain this?
Shall I?
Yeah. No, not Luke. You want to explain?
Luke, explain this.
Yes, right. That's really a rhetorical question.
15 years ago.
Okay, that's starting way.
Too far.
Just.
Very quickly, virtual futures was something that was involved with Sadie Klein, when she was here, and the Southern Cultures Research Unit at the University of Warwick 15 years ago.
Wait,
we're
that's
reviving
fast.
that, and we're doing something very, very quick. We're doing a salon event next Wednesday, 5 to 8 at the Trove, which is sort of out in the building, turn right down York Street by the Travel Lodge. It's going to be great, it's going to be weird. Go on the website and take a quick look at what it's all about. We've got Trudy Barber, Orphan Drift. We've got some of the homegrowns as well. Liam's going to install his piece, Liam Worth's going to install his piece. And it's going to be about this theme of the semi-artificial imagination.
Yeah, I don't have a link there. I'm just a philosopher.
It's changed.
Oh, it has changed?
Yeah, it has changed.
Okay. Well, you picked up Walter and
Yeah, I did.
Great. Good. And here it is, 24th. Now these are going to be, we're going to be doing, I appropriated this. We're going to be doing these underground, as it were, happenings all over the city. They're just going to pop up. So just be aware of it, that's all. You can come to them. You can dress as you like, which is to say, think about it. I'm not saying you have to dress, formally, but yeah, something interesting. How much are the tickets? Free!
Yeah.
Notice that? Good person. See this important part here? That's us. Okay, so that got all the information? Yeah. Okay. What I want to do today, I want to do a few things. And all of my remarks will always be sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Yeah. So that you get a sense of what's happening and why and stuff like that. So what I wanted to say, I needed a board last week because I didn't think that you could really hear it. Now, there are some of you in this group that are not technically taking the class. Don't tell me who you are. I don't care who you are, okay? I mean, I care who you are, but I don't care. But like I said at the outset, it is fantastic for those of you that knew to come anyway. that really don't take a class. And this way we weed it out. Remember I told you there was too many people last week. So now we have the right number, okay, and you're it-ish. Normally I have like 4 people or 5 people in a class, so this is a little bit larger than I'm usually teaching, but we'll get there. And normally we sit in little circles, but okay, that's also complicated, so you just have to deal with that. As I've said before, this course, this part of the course, is going to hopefully teach you how to inhabit philosophy as opposed to apply it. One of the worst things that can happen to you in school is the famous thing of letting education get in the way of your learning. Okay, so don't let these kind of concepts alter the way in which you can engage them. The other side of it is that they are complex. It's not an easy road, and you need to see how to make them your own, but at the same time, there's a whole history, there's a whole way of dealing with it, and so you need to also know the technique, or the nuts and bolts of it. Okay, so last week, we basically did the question of the ground. Remember all this? I'm going to just go through it very briefly. It's going to be this side here. So we started with the Enlightenment, which was Immanuel Kant et al. And in the Enlightenment was sapere aude. That's how you spell it in Latin. And it means dare to know. It means allow curiosity to be the generator of your research. That's your generator. If it's not, if you don't dare to know, if you don't have enough courage to ask the questions, you're already not going to be doing research. Anyway, not at the level you want here. Okay. In order to do this, in your own minds, you have a relation to what is called the ground and the way in which one can exit. So let me back up slightly by saying that Kant makes the argument that the first step of the Enlightenment is to stop asking mommy and daddy, what do you think? Or asking permission. That's what, he doesn't write like that, of course. He says, don't be immature. That a world that is run by priests and religious figures, although he was quite a religious man, but a world that has a social, civil world run mainly by the priest, or whatever, religious figures, rabbis, whoever it is, means that you're not fully stepping up to the plate. You're not taking responsibility. And so the first step is to take responsibility, and that means realizing that you can take responsibility, that you have the tools just because you're you, just because you're human. That's a big break from old ways of thinking, because the old ways of thinking was being a human, particularly in a different pecking order, male, then horses, cows, goats, women, babies. I mean, there was a pecking order of what you could be and who you were. And you were not to question that pecking order. And to be honest, today you still have the same problem. It's just a slightly different pecking order. But, there's still a pecking order. And if you question it too much, you can get in trouble. Okay, so one needs to learn where the exits are. And I don't mean just like the doors, but that's the obvious exits. But in a social environment, you need to figure out where those breaks are. And that's what we went into last week. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it at the moment because we're going to go. If there's any other questions on that, I will get into it. So the thing about the Enlightenment was that it basically argued that the primary feature of a modern society were these three things: the separation of church and state, that church was not supposed to be in the state, and state was not supposed to be in the church, and that's called secular. The rise of the individual, so that you knew that you yourself had an ability to do something, to be able to have a conviction. It just wasn't in your own head. And to also be dealing with the thing called change. The change was the ground, was the basis of the civilization as we know it today. Okay. Let me make that a little bit. See how easy that is? So excited. Okay. Now, unfortunately, or otherwise, there's a thing called zero sum, which is to say that you end up thinking that the world is a frame. The frame can look like this, it can look like this, it can look like that, it can look like this, but it's continuous. I could draw it without lifting my pen up. That is to say, the notion of reality is fully formed, what you call fully formed, and more importantly, was therefore unite, as in one, universal. Okay? For those of you that just sort of walked in secretly, we're just doing a slight recap of last week. Because we're going to get to Abraham. Promise. So, today, a lot of people, every people actually, who are modern, still have that view. Still have the view that there is the closed, universal thing. So everything that's inside here is where society exists, power, whatever, and everything out there doesn't really matter. Or it's not, we're not going to deal with it. So the fully formed thing means that if you have a conception of the world like this, that's what's called zero sum. Why? Because if I move this way, you are going to be pushed back to the wall. But if you move this way, I'm going to be pushed back to the wall. And this is a very specific notion of power, it's a very specific notion of art, it's a very specific notion of history. It just means it's coming from Newton, good old Isaac, or Newtonian physics, which says basically, pardon me, two objects cannot occupy the same place at the same time. That's the bottom. That's the first part of Newtonian physics. The second is that all objects have movement. That is the nature of an object. All human living, not human, all sentient beings move, and therefore change, again, is part of the core. Now, the zero sum is all very nice, except for the fact that power doesn't always operate like this. And in the information age, as we're going to see, it's all been broken. So that if you push this way, you can just sort of go off. If you push the other way, there's no walls in this way. So every political leader tries to create a zero-sum game. It's the easiest, best way to rule a country without calling the military by hand. The military is very expensive. You know, having, you know, if you're a dictator, not that, you know, there's a statement in the U.S. anyway where it goes, is power corrupts, absolute power is kind of nice. Okay, so if you have an army that you are the ruler of, and you run by force, when are you going to not trust them? How do you know they're not going to come up one day and chop off your head? Because there's a power game going on. So the best way to rule a country is by consensus, to get people to agree to this little story. And the second best thing to do is to get people to believe that there are these walls, that you can't break them. And one of the great ways to get people to believe this is you just beat them up, or arrest them, kill them. That really focuses the mind. Okay, but as I was saying, the zero sum, which is still with us today, as we speak, has a forebearer to it, and I brought it in called Telos. Now, like I said, this is all a summation of last week, and if I'm going too fast for those of you who kind of don't remember that we talked about this last week, that's okay. Telos is a very old word. It means unfolding. That's literally what it means. And unfolding is like this. So you notice that it's in a spiral in this case. I mean, you could unfold it, I can't draw very well, you could unfold it sort of like a package or something, you could unfold something. But what you need to understand is that it's continuous. So the line could look like that, it could look like that, it could look like that. It's continuous, it's not broken, it's continuous. Just look at this. I was around in the days where there was chalk. Okay, now they just use it for art, but anyway. if you start here, and I gave the example of the acorn, here's your little acorn. An acorn unfolds, if things are done correctly, it unfolds to become a tree. Very good, very good. A tree. All right. Let's see. Keep the day job. Okay. That's right. So the tree is the goal, as it were, of the acorn. It's here. And the goal, if the acorn goes toward the goal and becomes a tree, if all things are good, the water's right, the soil's good. So a society that's based on this notion, of which many societies are, believes that if you just water the people properly, they will unfold and become totally what they should be, which is, in this case, a tree. And in fact, the tree then becomes the reason for the path that the acorn goes on. So the goal is read back into this path and becomes the ground, the most crucial part of this, of how that thing's going to unfold. To say it again. So the goal is in fact the ground. Goal, ground, G words, great Scrabble. Goal is the ground. So you all are MA students, or whatever you are. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, MA students. You're going to get your MA at the end of 1 or 2 or 5,000 years, depending on what plan you're on. And then that is going to feed back to allow you to do things like get completely drunk on your face, walking through Birmingham. And like I said last week, and if you get arrested, you just say to the police, you know, I'm a student. And like that, this was all non, of course, let you go. Of course, that's not always going to work. I think I mentioned I tried to steal the top of the Bentley. When I first came here meaning England, London. When I say here, I'm really very New York. You know, there's Manhattan, there's 33rd Street, 42nd, so on, China, you know, like England. Okay, so when I came here, London, I came with about $2,000. I mean, it's really sad. And I used to pretend I was different intellectuals, and I'd find where all the conferences were going on so I could have food. And I'd go, and I have to tell you that psychoanalytic people have the best food conferences. Anyway, and then they start talking to you. You know, you grab a badge. Oh, yes, I really like your research. Great, can you explain it to me, just to see? Anyway, while you're eating rapidly. Anyway, I tried to steal the angel off the Bentley at night one day, and the police, it was like a trap. You know, and they came jumping out, you know, they were going to arrest me, and I tried my best accent, American accent. I am American. And of course, they were like, and? When I'm trying to steal this. But it's this Telos thing. You use it, you use the end to give you a platform, to give you the goal, to give you the ground. So ground, goal. Now, this becomes fine, I was saying before, if you're an acorn. But if you're a slave, and you unfold, you are to become a big slave. And if you want to become prime minister, or whatever, that is considered jumping out of the path, going off the path. There's an expression in the US called being bigger than your britches. I don't know, something like that. Do you have it here? Maybe. Too big for your britches. It's the same idea. You're thinking above your station. Okay? So if you think above your station, if you think you have the right, not the ability, let's say just the right to become something other than this tree, problems. Okay, so the small version is that the Telos thing doesn't work quite as well. But it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing that it does sit in most people's headspace. So you're a little baby girl, and you grow up to be a big baby girl. But let's say that means that you're going to be expected to, I don't know, make food, the traditional female things that are asked of you. And let's say you don't really doing that, or let's say you're really bad at doing that. Actually, I was talking to somebody the other day, or a little while ago, who really believes that women cannot drive the way men can. And I was like, well, I like to do sports cars and, whatever. I mean, yeah, but you're not really female. I was like, wait a second. let's have another discussion about this. I'm completely female. And then he said, well, then why don't you like to cook? I was like, let's start again. Before I have to kill you. Okay, so the thing about telos is goal. There's three parts: process, start. And depending on how it operates, and the telos is with us in many forms. In many forms. You have a kid, a lot of you are parents, you have a kid, you're going to protect that child. That child, when that child becomes, say, 13 or 14, or wherever they become when they decide that they know more than you do, so whatever age that is, six. Yeah. Then you're thinking to yourself, you are a 6-year-old, and your mother, your father, or whatever it is, and you need to figure out what's the relationship between the goal, which is to get them to adulthood without you killing them, and them going back around and become the citizen upon which they are going toward to be. Does that make sense? Okay, good. And you can see why that would be very useful for parenting, so to keep you sane. So telos has its function. So never think that this is just, that was then, unless people are stupid, and now us moderns, we know what to think better. No, it's all in there. Just need you to keep remembering. This crops up in so many different ways of thinking. For example, the women's movement, to get a women's movement. Okay. There are some, in the 1960s, there was, I don't know which phase it was called, a wave, first wave, or I think it was the second wave or third wave of feminism or something. Anyway, argued that there was a thing called the woman's sexual liberation movement. Okay. Now, because of different political things, whatever, eventually the word sexual got taken out, so it became the women's movement, the women's liberation movement. Eventually, liberation got taken out, so it became the women's movement. And still, that was helpful because at least there was an idea that the goal was to, let's say, get equal pay for equal right. And then that goal would come back around and give meaning to women. So I'm not saying that it's a totally tragic thing, telos, but it's got its problems. We need to keep hearing that. Okay, the next thing I want to make sure you get a sense of. Now, we're just going to keep telos up there. The next thing you've got to get a sense of is the relationship of ology. Down here. So, teleology. Ology means logic of. That's all it means. So, sociology, logic of the social. Teleology, logic of the unfolding. That's all it means. So if you say something is teleological, it's the logic of how something unfolds. But this unfolding where the goal becomes the ground, and the ground puts you on your path. And there is a path. Okay, so clear? All good? Yep, okay. Next thing, we're almost done with last week, is the word radical. Radical, one of my favorite words, which is stolen by vitamin companies to mean, the free radical thing. I remember when I first heard it, in the year one. There are all these free radicals. I was thinking, God, that's great how they're using that term. And then it was like they were bad. The free radicals are something you want to get rid of. I thought, God, that's clever. Anyway, radi. To be a radical means getting to the root. That's literally what it means. You're getting to the root of the problem. Which brings in the whole tree thing, right? Because getting to the root of the problem, so tree side you're drawing, and then the roots. So let's say that's grass. Let's say your tree is not doing well. If you are radical, you're going to figure out everything right down to the roots. You're going to go through root and branch, as they say, or there's another weird term here, buckles and braces or something.
Oh.
That's it, belts and braces. It's the same idea. You go through the whole closet and do everything. Radi, getting to the root. And this is also important to being a modern. People feel that they have the right to be radical in the best sense of the word, getting to the root, asking, so that what? You can see where the perimeters are. You can see where the breaks might be. You can make a move when you have to. And for those of you that think this way on a continual basis and are normally called paranoid, that, the old thing, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. You need to know where the exits are, not, like as a drill. I mean, it'd be a little bit crazy if you were, I don't know, in your family and suddenly you told your whole family, okay, everybody, under the tables, and then everybody like under the table and then you escape. Actually, again, in America, they used to have these drills for when a nuclear bombs might be dropped. It's fantastic. And they asked children to get under the tables. I mean, it's fantastic. And people did. I don't know what they thought was going to happen. Other than, you just die with wood on top of you, on the table, but, it's great. Okay, now we get to the hard part. Any questions so far before I move away from radicality, teleology, and all the rest of this kind of thing? So the summation so far is that you end up figuring out that there's a way to exit, and you figure out those exits, or you make a guess, let's say reasonable guess, in fact a rational guess, a reasoned guess. That is to say, your intuition is not based on some drive or some thing buried in Neanderthal man that's now emerged in you, unfolding. Your reason is that okay, exit is important, and I'm going to practice this because when the real moment comes, I'll be able to exit. I'll know that there's a way to exit. So that's why Nietzsche, we start off with Nietzsche, and he says basically, you get a sense of what conviction means, people. Conviction often is taken as dogma. You have a conviction, no matter what someone says, you're not going to change your mind. But real conviction is knowing that there are exits, knowing that there is a system. The problem is that a lot of times the system is seen as simply teleological. And that's only one type of system. But, as I said to start with, usually, politically, governments always try to set up a telos. And they always try to set up a telos in terms of a zero sum. Leaders and led. And that's that's what's called the first rule of political science. There are always leaders and led until the 21st century. Until suddenly, this thing, guerrilla terrorism, where you could chop off the heads of various supposed leaders, and it still just kept coming. It was a totally different it wasn't a zero-sum game. You couldn't chop off. Actually, when you think about it, in the old days meaning like when the U.S. won the revolution. You know how people used to fight in the military? They used to fight standing at each other. And they bang, 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 and whoever was left standing was the one that kind of won that section. It was like nuts. And when the Civil War happened, or actually before that, with the First Peoples in the U.S., when the First Peoples were helping the settlers deal with the French and the English, they taught guerrilla warfare, where you're hanging up in the trees and you're writing and you're doing these sort of secret things. And a lot of if you read the documents, it's so fantastic because they say things, that's unfair. It's unfair, it's like, okay, it's war, people. It's like, okay, yeah, it is unfair that someone is sitting in a tree, but why would you be so stupid as to fight like this? And then just boom or boom. So the idea that you could circumvent, that there was a system, you could circumvent the system. You just had to figure out what the system was. And if you figure out the system to look like that, that's a problem, because it was only true some of the time. It was true in order to keep the people sort of in place. Now, that leads us to the famous next part called Dialectics. And I swear I will go to Abraham and Isaac and
song will come on. Okay, so dia means two. Now what that means is, of course, dialectics doesn't mean two. That'd be way too easy. Dialectics means three, as you know. Why? Because what dialectics is saying is that here's the problem with telos as the unfolding. You know, we already saw that this gets read back into that. So there's no real way to change. Change is just sort of a genetic thing that happens. And I mean, for those of you that are following the stuff in eugenics, which is a form of figuring out where the genomes are and whether or not there's a gay gene or a black gene or a female gene or whatever the thing is, that eugenics takes its position from telos. It's hardly surprising. Okay, so you look to see, why is that person turning out like that? Well, it must be in their genetic makeup that they're unfolding. So you see, even in today's science, telos is very strong. Anyway, dialectics makes the argument, and this was first of all brought forward by Heraclitus. We're not talking about him. I'm just telling you where you can go look. And Heraclitus makes the argument that you have a toe. There it is. Again. Yeah, there's your toe. And Heraclitus sticks his toe in the water. You gotta love the Greeks. This is how they talk about this. Okay. Heraclitus would never be hired in the philosophy department, even though he is the founder of dialectics. They wouldn't recognize this as real. Anyway, this is a small dig. Okay, he sticks his toe in the water, and he realizes, let's get out more, he realizes that his toe is both wet, because the water is going up so. It's not stagnant water, the water, it's a river, let's say, just so we can get this. And it's also not wet at the same time. So time becomes the point that he sticks his toe in, and he realizes that his toe is wet and not wet at the same time. Just stating that, maybe that's. And just try and remember that in sticking the toe in, he realizes that it doesn't go wet, not wet, wet, not wet. It goes like this is wet and this is not wet. Wet, not wet, wet. You can't divide them off. Wet and the not wet are stuck together, and that's the first moment when he, little Heraclitus, realizes that every instant has at least two sides. Now that's a weird concept. Think of an instant. How long is this instant? What's an instant? You know, that's already longer than a normal instant. The instant has two sides. Dialectic. It's stuck together. If you pulled off the one, you'd be left with another one, but it wouldn't make any sense. You can only understand them stuck together. So I have, I'm gonna hold this piece of paper, but this thing with it's too transparent. I have a ruler here. So this back side of the ruler and the front side of the ruler, I could cut it really fine and throw that side off. It'd still have this side and this side. If I kept doing that until it was like the thinnest thing on the face of the planet, it would still have two sides. You can't break the two sides. Well, anyway, not in third dimension. It's a little one just there. Anyway, but for the time being, this side and this side are stuck together. Front and back are stuck together. And the back, this might sound really crazy, can never be on the front of this ruler. And the front can never be on the back, no matter how far we stretch it, this way, that way, whatever. It's front is there and back is there. And they stay on each side of the fence. And they're stuck together. That's dialectics. The two sides are stuck together. And that doesn't mean that this side is male and that side is female. If you look at it, the whole picture, this side, let's say, is male, and this side would be not male. Excellent. Very good. This side is wet. What side is this? Excellent. Good, good. This side is dry. Okay, got it in two. Okay, so dialectics stuck together. It just means that for every point on the one side, its not side exists. And once you know that a not side exists, then you have room to move. The moment you realize that this thing is not quite as solid as all that, the moment you realize that my saying that this is on this side, and this is on that side, and this side is the exact opposite of that side, except they're exactly the same, right? Did you catch that a little bit? This side, that side. It's not like this guy, it's not like the front side of the ruler I could extend it, but the back side would just sort of sit there going, well, whatever. The back of the ruler and the front of the ruler, they move at the same time. And they go down at the same time. And they go sideways at the same time. It's not that one is always running to catch up with the other. They are stuck together. One is called the antithesis. Antithesis. Notice it has the word anti, thesis. So the backside, let's say, is the antithesis, and the front side would be called? Okay. So that means that anything, if you start with the thesis and you don't realize that it also has absolutely at the same time, when Kierkegaard is sticking his toe in the water, a not side to it, then game over for you, and you don't get to go move into the Enlightenment period. Okay, then you get to stay back in non-Enlightenment moment. You get to join the Bit Romney camp. You don't have to be in the past to be Enlightenment. Okay, so every side. Is there any Americans in the room who haven't registered yet? Anyway, every side, everything has two sides, and those two sides are gathered together at the same time. At the same time. The toe in the water, at the moment that toe goes in the water, at the moment the water is dealing with the toe, that thing called at the same time is the ground for the thesis and the antithesis. I know. Okay, blood. Okay. Let's try this again. Thesis, antithesis. They're stuck together. We know that we can pull them apart, but only, quote, abstractly. If you pull them, where's Dane? He knows that you can do this otherwise, but that's because he's into quantum physics. Okay, but let's not go there yet. That was cruel to the rest of the people. Okay. Thesis, antithesis. It's stuck together at the same time. Let's just drop out the word same. It's stuck together, time. Time is the ground of thesis, antithesis. Anybody have a headache yet? Okay, you following it? And we're only in week 2, so don't get it. Okay, so. Now another way of saying this, just trying to remember that for the time being. You don't have to get nuts with it. Just hang on there. What Hegel argues, do you know that this is what we did last week? You see, I didn't have a little board here, so I couldn't really do it properly. So we still have our little tree, we have our radical, Telos. Okay, so Hegel argues you got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere, and you're going to start abstractly. Because where are you going to start? You're just going to start where you are. This is the basis of being an artist. You start right where you are. It's like Dorothy, the Wizard of Oz. I will use Dorothy, the Wizard of Oz a lot. So if you get tired of this, come up with something else you can tell me that will relate to it. People have seen the Wizard of Oz, right? So we know, I've asked that last week, so we've all seen the Wizard of Oz, and if not, and make sure you see the one with Judy Garland in it, because the other ones don't count. She's the best. Okay. Judy starts on her little path on the Telos, which is the yellow brick road, which is going to go and unfold until she gets to the bloody castle, which then is going to allow her to go home, right? This is how this works. It's her goal. Her goal is her purpose is her path is her process is her start. And she says to Glinda, who comes in like the Aryan, and she says, I don't know how to get to the castle. And she goes, you start where you are. You start right here. And then they launch into song. Right? Okay, so you start, where do you start? You start right here. Or here. Or here. Notice that here keeps following me. Or wherever I go, I can't seem to get out of here. I can't leave here. Here. How do I get there? How do I get over there? If I run really fast, here is like, and by the time I'm over there, well, I'm no longer here. But I can't get rid of this here. You know, so Hegel, GWF. Does anybody know what that stands for? G. George. Who said that? Well done. Oh, you don't care. You're a Hegelian. We would have found that out. We are secret. Yeah. What's W stand for? Take a wild guess. Wilhelm. Ready? F. Friedrich. Excellent. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. That's, of course, why he abbreviates to. Okay. Hegel. When did he write? The early 1800s. Early 1800s. Okay. Till about 1840s or so. And of course, when did Marx happen? Karl Marx. Karl Marx happened.
Much later.
No, not much later.
No.
No, that's why.
1860s, 1870s?
No, 1820s to about 1870 or so. Which is kind of amazing, isn't it? And we'll go back to him in a second. Okay, so what Hegel says is you got to start right here, just like Dorothy. But we found that if you start right here, you can't get out of here. And the whole point is to get out of here, right? So, I mean, the whole point is exit. And you can't get out of here. So what does he say you start with? What would be the opposite of here?
There.
Not there.
Not here.
Not here. He starts with not here. And that sounds crazy. And it's like, and you all will become sad philosophers if you think, that makes sense. Ooh, you know, things fall from your eyes. It's a dangerous, slippery slope. You'll start finding things funny that are really not funny. Your family will look at you like, you know. Okay, so you'll say, I now realize what is the opposite of here? Not here. So we nod very sagely, going, yes. For this, you pay this kind of money to. Okay. Yeah, these are the kind of things that made Hegel very famous. Because Hegel realized as long as you're in the not here, okay, you can't get to here, that's a small problem. But you're not stuck in the here. You're stuck in the not here, which is in fact nowhere. In fact, it's no thing. Nothing. So, or no. See how things get divided? It's so exciting being in philosophy. You make up words, you divide them. You talk about things like the thing. You talk like that. You know, das, thing, das sein. Okay, anyway. Okay, no thing. No thing is where you start, just like in the telos. So you're going to start, no thing. Now, as you're on your path, your goal is to get somewhere. Right? So the no thing is meant to get you to your goal, which is something. Or even somewhere. Either one counts. And what do we say about the telos? What happens if that's your goal? That does what? It comes back around and comes down. Okay? So the no thing is on its little path to somewhere. But we now know that if the no thing does its little path to something, it will still be like the bloody acorn unfolding. So you haven't gotten out of that sort of packaged sense. So here's what Hegel came up with. And you got to give him his due. It is clever. And not only is it clever, it underwrites all political, aesthetic, pretty much everything up until now. And I would say even now. I had all to these because she knows how important this is. Anyway, okay, what he says is, okay, you start, obviously the somewhere, the something, is going to come back around and get the ground to this abstract thing. But because we don't want to prejudge anything, we're going to start with the no thing. That to say, or what he calls the immediate. Now the immediate is a word that's time, right? Immediate means time, doesn't mean space. It means it's a temporal thing. Come immediately to my office. I am the Red Queen. I need this right now. Right? Immediate. In, again, one of these division words, means not mediated. Not mediated. Just write that down. I'm not going to explain it. Not mediated. Immediate. So you start with the immediate. You start right at this instant. And we know with Heraclitus the instant is wet, not wet. Whatever. You start in the instant, and the instant is immediate, not mediated. And how do you begin to understand the immediate, the not mediated, or what he calls the antithesis? Okay, you know that the opposite is going to be what for immediate? Mediate. It's going to be mediate. I know, you end up sounding like an idiot, but anyway, it's okay. It's Hegel. Okay. You start with immediate, and you come out with mediated is going to be the not side of the not. Got it? Or what he calls mediated, because he names it, and it's a long, long story. I'm sure you don't want to get there because you want to know about Abraham trying to kill his son. We'll get there in a minute. The immediate, he counterposes it to intuition. And he says, here's the thing. We can never really know the immediate because it's immediate. It's not mediate. It doesn't come to our vision. We can't see it. It's ephemeral. The only way to grasp it is through intuition. And unfortunately, or fortunately, this is where most artists start and end. I don't get much past intuition. What he says is that intuition gets sublated into the non-mediated. It's a great word, sublated. I love this word. I don't know why. I'm obviously troubled. Sublated is kind of like, again, keep the day job. That's meant to look like an espresso maker. Okay, just in case you're wondering. You know how you put the grinds there, coffee grinds, put the water here. And you don't say, I'm going to make myself coffee with, I'm going to make myself water pushed through beans. You call it something, you call it coffee, right? You're not going to have this long string of discussion. You're not going to say, I'm going to have intuition that's sublating the immediate. You're going to call it, in fact, see, you know how it bubbles up? So the beans sublate the water, and you come up with coffee. Coffee comes back around to give meaning to this whole stupid process of, grinding the beans and putting in the thing. Coffee is the synthesis of the water and the beans and the heat. But what Hegel says is intuition gets sublated into the immediate, and it produces what he calls big intuition. That is to say, the whole picture of intuition. So now we know from Hegel that intuition really is like the ruler. side of the ruler is intuition, let's say the present side, and the not side is the immediate, is the not mediated. So all real forms of intuition have to be located in the instant, in the immediate. If it's not located in the instant, it's not intuition, and it's just that. Now, intuition comes back around and does what? Forms the what? Ground. Forms the ground. It forms the ground of these 2 points. So finally now we have intuition forming the ground of those 2 points. So to put it slightly differently, just to annoy you further, let's say we had, this is going to make a little bit more sense. Let's say we said that, it's a long argument because we know that dry is not the opposite of wet. We know that man is not the opposite of woman, and all the rest of it. Having said that, I'm just going to do a horrible thing, a shorthanded for Marx here. So he would make the argument that you have bourgeoisie, and on the other side of the bourgeoisie is proletariat, probably here. Proletariat. Taken together, they create the capitalist mode of production. The capitalist mode of production comes back around and gives meaning to these 2 sides. If you're going to have revolution, what has to happen? If you're going to have change, real change, so that system falls, what has to happen? Somebody has to lead that picture. Now, Marx argues, probably isn't going to be the bourgeoisie. He argues it's not going to be the bourgeoisie because if they lead this picture, they have everything in the system. So why would they want to give up goods? So he makes the argument that it's the proletariat that has to lead the revolution because they're the only ones who have famously nothing to lose. Okay, so if they leave, this whole system falls. Nothing to lose. So do you see how capitalist mode of production comes back around, gives meaning to these 2 sides? It's the same idea here. Intuition comes back around, gives meaning to these 2 sides. So the whole picture, sorry, I'm just really going to do this later, but I know you haven't read Hegel, so this will help you. So the whole picture of what he calls universal concept of intuition, applied intuition, is that on the one hand it has the not mediated, on the other side, sorry I have to draw it like this, but as you can see I'm really not very good at drawing. He's got intuition, little I, intuition. And it doesn't matter which way that gets sublated. Like if I had not wet and wet, and I sublated the not wet into the wet, it would create big wet, which would come back around and give meaning to these 2 sides. But if I did it reversed, and I had wet sublated into not wet, it would create dry. Are you just like going, hell? Okay. Just follow me on this because it will never make sense. But it might make a little bit of sense in a minute. Okay, I say universal. I use the word universal because it's not Hegel's opinion that this is so. He says this is the full concept of intuition. Nothing can be added, nothing can be subtracted. If you subtract something out of that concept, you don't have intuition. If you add something, you don't have intuition. You have the whole picture. And that notion of the whole picture, the whole reality, that nothing is outside of that reality, equals universal. So anything that's universal, whenever that term is used, it means that it fits no matter where you are. If it's 7 o'clock here, the notion, we were talking about ethics the other day. If somebody's child, God forbid, is snatched, killed, tortured, I would like people to think that that's probably bad, or that is bad, no matter where you are in the world. That's a universal position. It doesn't matter what the culture believes or doesn't believe. It's bad, B-A-D, bad, bad, bad. So someone like Adorno, for example, wants to say that Nazism is bad. Now, a lot of people thought it was good. Tons of people thought it was good. But it's bad. And he wants to say bad. I don't want to say it's relatively bad. It's just bad. It's bad no matter what my opinion is good, whatever, it's bad. So there's a lot riding on the fact of something being universal. Same thing about art. You know, a lot of times people say, nah, you know, it's just my taste. You know, I like it, then it's art. No. Your opinion of whether or not you like it, like I said at the beginning, is pretty much irrelevant. It's not completely irrelevant, because obviously you start with the immediate. But that it's your opinion is wonderful, but it's the same thing as your shit, that I was saying last week. You know, when you come as a child and you give your parents the one thing they don't have, that they can't, you know, you give your parents the one thing that you can give them that you wouldn't be able to give anyway if you were doing anything else, because you can't work, you can't get money. The one thing that you can give your parents that is wholly of yourself is your shit. This is the Freudian position. And Freud says all children give their parents shit, and most artists are basically children who have not quite gotten past that stage. And they, you know, come around and here's my shit. What do you think? It's wonderful, isn't it? And everyone's like, you know, I don't know, you know, it's like, well, I love it. You know, it's like, why isn't it good? Yeah. What Hegel is saying here is that that actually sometimes shit really is shit. And even if it has come from your wonderful self, it's still not so great. And you have to learn without imposing a position. This is the key here. So this is where we're going. So the whole picture. So what he says, and I'm just going to do this very quickly. You can go to sleep for a moment. Those of you that are following this, that'll be great, because I want to get to what the actual lecture is about today. But basically, if you start with the immediate, the not mediated, or the antithesis, and on the other side, pretend that that's like, I don't know, on the other side of this plane, on the other side of that is going to be immediate, or this thing, that if you take these things and you stick them together and one gets sublated into the other, then it forms in the first step, capital I, intuition. And intuition then comes back around and gives meaning to those two sides. And then what happens, I mean, you think it would stop there, but no. Then what happens is that you have, so I'm going to write it much smaller here, immediate versus thing, taken together, creates intuition, comes back around, makes the platform, and that could be one set of telos. However, you know, top there. He says, well, let's pretend that creates a plane. What would be on the other side of that plane? He says, well, on the other side of that plane is what he would call sense certainty. Now, here's where a lot of you are at. Where sense certainty is a slightly more sophisticated form of intuition, because what it's done, it's sublated into itself immediacy, little intuition, big intuition. It's come back around and it's formed this thing that gives you a kind of an educated guess. It kind of, you're feeling around the dark and thinking, yeah, I think I'll go that way because it makes sense somehow. That's sense certainty. And so you take the intuition, you sublate it, and out comes big sense certainty. Much more, let's say, you know, had your Wheaties sense certainty. That comes back around and forms the ground for those two parts. I'm just going to give you this thing. Like I said, you're not going to get this, but we're going to get into this in much more detail about 5 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now. Just so you've heard it. Then what he says is that, all right, let's pretend that is like where the immediate used to be. So now it's called sense certainty. Right? The big sense certainty. What's on the other side of that? He says what's on the other side of that is perception. Here's where most of you just get derailed. Because you go, well, it's my perception. I perceive that this is the case. What you really mean is my opinion. What you really mean is it's your intuition. But well, let's say you might mean perception. Perception is a very refined version of sense certainty, because it's taken a whole bunch of stuff and it's stuck it into this thing called perception, which then creates, back around to create What does it create?
Big perception.
Big perception. You know, you're better than the Slate students. They didn't get that. And they were MA students. Big perception. And then perception comes back around and creates the ground. But of course, he's not done. With why we're done. What's on the other side of perception? Isn't that secret door behind perception? For Hegel, it's understanding. And understanding is that which allows you to have intuition and passion, like a whole bunch of stuff, and still maintain a sort of focused view of the system. That's when you have understanding. You get that there's a system. You get that the system has these movable parts. You can pretty much figure out what the next step's going to be. That's the understanding. Now, of course, you take that all together, perception, sense certainty, intuition, immediate, and you sublate it into understanding, and what do you get? Big understanding, very good. Okay, it's quite sad. Okay, so you have all this stuff here, right? Okay, and this is now big understanding, which comes back around and gives the ground, but of course he's not done yet. He says, actually, what's on the other side of big understanding? The other side of big understanding is knowledge, or wisdom. And then you get all this stuff. It's sublated into knowledge. Knowledge becomes what? Big knowledge. Big knowledge. That comes back around and gives the ground to a whole picture. And so Hegel basically says, and so when you hear this, hear it correctly, idealism does not mean, idealism is the idea, that is to say, knowledge, that is the highest form of anything that can happen, that comes back around and grounds the whole picture. So if you're an idealist, you're dealing with, and by the way, almost everybody in this room, if you're a modern, you are an idealist. You just are. Anyone who fights for a cause, democracy, you're fighting for democracy, right? It's out there. It's the concept. It's going to come back around and get you going. But it gets you going in this very complex way. So you can see how Telos, see how far we've gone in 45 minutes. That was for children now. Now you know Telos is like, oh, yes, whatever. Now we know that this real unfolding does this kind of thing. Now Hegel, because it's Hegel, and guess what? Hegel's a philosopher. A great shock, I know. He therefore thinks that the highest, smartest thing you could ever be is what? What?
To be an idealist.
Well, to be a philosopher. It's fantastic. You look around and you find who's the most important person in the world. I am. Fantastic. Yay. Okay. Where does he put art in this case? For Hegel, art can never get beyond the understanding. His argument is that if art gets beyond the understanding, it's crap. It turns into philosophy. And there's something to be said about that. See, he's dangerous, old Hegel. He makes sense. And you go, oh yes, of course, now I don't need to understand any of this stuff. Because I want to stay in either intuition or perception. Sense certainty always gets bad ratings, because it just sounds too logical. But so most people either stay in intuition, or they move into this thing called perception or the understanding. And Hegel says that that's as far as you can go as an artist. There is nothing higher in aesthetics except philosophy, the science of knowledge. Okay, now,
There are two different things, no?
what do you mean?
That once you take it into this, to the cognition of philosophy, you lose the art.
Well, when you say cognition, what you really mean is perception or understanding.
Concept.
when you take into account, well then what do we do with conceptual art? Which most of you people are here doing.
Well, yeah, when you take it into philosophy, it's no longer art.
Unless you're a conceptual artist, in which case you say, excuse me, Hegel is a little bit jerk here, you know, and that, you know, I think that I, as a philosopher, as an artist, in fact, most artists in well, let's say in modern times, will say art is precisely the concept. That's why I was in a couple of tutorials today. Not a single person did what I would call, you know, traditional art, or what would be, you know, what Gombrich would have a heart attack today. You know, he would come in here and go, what the hell is that? You know, the story of art. No story was told today of art, and it didn't even look like anything. You know, because why? Because conceptual art is, you know, king. Now, I'm not criticizing it or saying it's good or bad or whatever. I'm trying to get you to think why Hegel would have a heart attack with that as well. Because for Hegel, art, which can only get up to the understanding at the best, is because it represents. For Hegel, art represents. That's what it does. It represents the present.
So is he saying that art is not fact-based, which is why it can't become knowledge?
No.
In the way he was perceiving it?
No, he's saying that no fact is fact-based. So
But is there the possibility in what he's saying that you can make art with big understanding, and actually that might elicit in other people knowledge?
Yes.
Or set up a system of other people going to the next. But actually in itself it doesn't do that, but it takes people there.
Well, that's a very generous reading of Hegel. What he's actually saying, it's not that complex, but what he's actually saying is that art, when it functions as this thing called art, functions that way because it is able to represent the immediate in a graspable form.
But today, art is far more confrontational than that.
Yes. Yes, so you're right. So Hegel is having a little bit of a heart attack in today's world. He would have serious issues. He'd come in here and just lose his hair. You know, it would not be good for him.
That's serious issues anyway. For the world,
Well, yeah, that's true. But
which is by the change.
yes, because see what he's done, what Hegel has done here is he's figured out how to put change at the base of the system in the sense of the immediate, in the non-mediate. That's change. That's this kind of ephemeral. We can't even you don't know what it is, or it's called the present. Because once you're in the present, once you grasp the present, go somewhere else. You know. And what he's saying is that music, for example, for Hegel, is not art. Because music cannot represent. At best, music gets as far as intuition. That's it. So for you musicians in the world, you get even more annoyed with them. Art is the highest form of spirit, higher than music, because not only can it do what music does, which is bring in the intuition and this kind of, but it can do so by representing, by having you look at something and go, yeah, I can see what that is. Constable all over the place. Constable showing you how to think, giving you pathways to think. Beth, did you have another question?
No, keep going. I mean, let's keep going.
Okay, so you've done extremely well. Everybody's hair looks very flat. I'm very sorry about that. It will get better, but all you need to remember for right now, before we get into Abraham and Herder, is Hegel is saying that you can't divide off nothing from something. Everything has two sides, but to make sense of those sides, you have to understand the role of sublation and synthesis, and the coming back around to give the ground. That coming back around to give the ground, that's telos. You have to understand one side, the other side, creates synthesis, comes back around, gives the ground. The ground then gets you going. So for Hegel, the highest form of knowledge, the highest form of anything is knowledge. The highest form of any system is the knowledge is the knowledge, not the knowledge of something, just the knowledge. And that comes back around and gives you the ground. And so you become a concept. Gay, artist, philosopher, you go towards your concept. It's your ground. It's the basis of all the liberation movements. Think about it. So Hegel's not too far from us, even though he's got some very reactionary ideas. We're not going to go there. We're going to celebrate him in a moment, just so you can get a sense of what this is about. So the highest form of the Enlightenment thinking is to know that you can know. And not only can you know, that you must know. You must not ignore the fact that the most crucial aspect of the Enlightenment is that knowledge is the ground on which you walk. Knowledge becomes the ground. Not intuition, not hoping and wishing and singing, knowledge. Which is why for the Enlightenment and modernist, reason is the primary way to go. It's the primary exchange. Now we know that reason gets into a lot of problems, like alienation, like the idea that the society is based on the rise of the individual, the good news and the bad news, same news. Because suddenly the individual's then blamed for everything. Oh, you didn't get a job? Well, it's your fault. Oh, you don't understand what's going on? What's the matter with you? See, so the individual, so it can be played both ways. Now, how about if we do a 5-minute break? Or do you want to continue?
Great.
Or is that broken? Okay. Have literally a 5-minute break. Because we go into better not. Make sure you sign the tabloid there.
Yes, and they're already booking up quite fast. What did you want? Me or Robert? Robert. I'm going. The lights should be on there.
Okay, all right.
Point of view and ideas.
Yeah.
Because it was just a really simple idea about drawing.
You like the Hegel stuff?
So
interesting. So I've not read loads of
so we have to do, so kids have to learn.
Oh, right, yeah.
and say
Why do we not?
Yeah.
reading zeros and
Why?
ones.
Oh, yeah, she's great, yeah.
So why do we have all these things that we do? So it's very nice. So then I just wondered about things like every book. Yeah, that one has got
And when I went to the lectures, I was really like, oh my god, that's amazing. And the phone mom started having she was so cool. She was like, yes,
I've never seen it actually.
Good, well, okay.
great. So we missed
I only watched it. I only watched
Yeah.
it for
No.
Yeah.
because I asked and they just said.
don't.
No, but I don't want to done and then just.
Oh, I think you meant at work.
Oh no, I don't do anything at work
Yeah.
either. No, I don't do anything at work.
No, I was like, I'm really skimming under the radar. I don't really know what it is. So it's brilliant.
I don't think it makes you less of your job. It makes you slightly better.
It's true, which means that
If you're experienced, I think it just makes you better. I think it's just you don't overthink.
yeah.
I say that
You should. Just sit there. My brain. Doing all that.
I know, well we are as well. And so that everything is very boring. Well, that is
You sit there and think
and also this thing about that we really don't need to be or it's just really which really should be.
Hey, are you ready or no? What's that? And we're going to try and simplify it. The person who does that is Grace. She's away right now. Running away.
When we do it in a second,
There's loads of systems that we think are wrong, and then it's suddenly backwards.
Okay. I think this is the smokers, I guess. How you doing? Yeah? Getting there? Okay, I just wrote up a little sort of thing that we've done. So you could read it that way up, or you could read it the other way down. So we know that you start with immediate, with non-mediated, it's sublated into intuition, that becomes big intuition, that comes back around, sublated sense certainty, so on and so forth, right? So we all know this now? So we know that the opposite of wet, opposite of woman. Okay, but now here's the next thing you need to remember. If I say to you, for example, the opposite of child, we know is not child. If I say that that's the case, child, not child, kind of thing, don't think in your mind that it goes off into infinite moment. Like so that, I mean, while we could stretch, if I blew her, not quite as good. Okay. While we could stretch this, and then we know that both sides would follow, that go together. Actually, what Hegel's saying is nothing's outside of this, of the parameters of this ruler. So if I say to you, wet, not wet, taken together, creates the synthesis, comes back around, blah, blah, blah. What I'm saying to you is that that's the whole picture. And it doesn't matter if we stretched it off into 15 different galaxies. You can't get outside of this. You can't get, say it again. Doesn't matter how, there's no outside to a concept. There's no like thing that sits outside of that. After you do this whole ridiculous scenario with knowledge, there's nothing outside knowledge. There's not even not knowledge. Nothing is outside of knowledge. So now this becomes the basis of physics. When you think about the universe, think about the concept of the universe. I'm just going to be horrible right now. I'm really, really sorry, but I have to be. Okay, you too can become a philosopher one day and enjoy doing this kind of thing. Here's the ruler. There's nothing outside the universe.
Probably.
Nothing.
Why not?
Because if the universe is as stretched to infinity as it can possibly be, there is nothing outside of that infinity.
But the same logic would say that there was.
The same logic would say that there was, but it gets sublated. Because this is why I want you to understand what Hegel's saying here and why he's a modern and not a quantum physicist. He's saying he's a modern because nothing is outside of the concept. Because in order to deal with this whole thing, it's got to be fully what it is. It can't be your opinion. And in order to be your opinion, nothing can be left out and nothing can be left in. It's got to be the whole picture. If it's not the whole picture, then it's not a concept. And if it's not a concept, then it's not the basis of reality. Just write that down. You'll see. It'll make sense at some point. So it doesn't matter how big we make this attendance monitoring sheet. Okay? We can make it so that it covers the universe 15 times. You can't get off the page. You can't get off of this surface. Okay? This is also the basis of what's his name? Who did Fourth Dimensional Man? It's Kaku. I can't get his first name. It's right name. I'll go back in a second. Okay, so are we okay with this more or less? This is the bare bones, this is the nuts and bolts, this is the thing. No? Yeah.
Just try and get my head around it. So if
Silly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But if there's a degree of uncertainty about anything, then it cannot form part of this model.
Yes, that's correct, in a way. Because what forms the model is certainty, not uncertainty. That's exactly right.
Okay.
How did you get there?
I don't notice.
Intuition. No. But that's different.
So it cannot deal with a lot of how people experience reality because
Or
of the degree.
experience at all.
Yeah.
Experience is completely off the register here.
Yeah.
Which is what Marx's criticism of the Hegelian dialectic is about. Because Marx basically says, Hegel, you got it upside down. You got it. Anybody ever read Marx anymore or ever? Try and think back. Marx makes the argument that all this is really brilliant. The problem is that the basis of reality is not knowledge. The basis of reality is history. I know. Face. Okay. And so what he says is that, so let's say you have knowledge as the base under Hegel. That makes you a little brown, and you have the whole zillions of things that are in here that create knowledge. And come back around to the ground, right? Right. So what Marx says is that actually you just got to turn it on the side like this. And that this he calls history, Marx. Or politics. Or experience. What Marx says is what moves the movement of knowledge is what gets involved with knowledge. And so Hegel's got it right, he's just got it wrong. In the sense that this should become the base, not this.
And isn't it the way the scientific community often works with things that says this to the best of our knowledge at this point, or we'd always give it a sort of a parameter, I suppose, that you'd say if you look at this would say that this would then have to be the case, or this would have to work in this way. So it's not an absolutism. It's about
That's right. It's not,
Within-
in fact, that's a good word. It's not an absolute. Not an absolutism. E for absolute. Vodka. I should have purple vodka. Spoke smile. Or Grey Goose. Okay, it's not absolutism, which is to say that the absolute, that which cannot be changed, is certain, but it's certain at this unchangeable static sense. But what Hegel is saying is that it's just, it's certain in the sense that it becomes that. It becomes what it is. It becomes the is. It becomes what it is. It doesn't become what it's always meant to be in the sense of the acorn to the tree. It could become a dead tree, a weird tree, some sort of bizarre scenario of a tree, but it doesn't become this absolute thing called tree. In fact, Hegel will go further and say there is no such thing as the general concept of a concept. There's no general, if I said to you draw a tree, each of you would draw trees in whatever way. There's no absolute concept of the tree. There's only what he calls the substance, or the sublation. The thing that's sublating, that's a substance, that's the essence. That's too complicated. We're not going to go there anymore. We're just going to go to the fact that what he creates, so this is a very important point that you raised, what he creates is the platform of probability or certainty. So that for moderns, certainty becomes the game. And that which is certain, Hegel, is always subjective. What is it subjective to? It's subjective to reason. For Marx, what is Marx subjecting things to? He's subjecting it to history. So anything that exists as a fact is a fact that is subjective. That is to say, it always has this other exit point. There's no solid fact. Solid in the sense that it's absolute, that it can never change. It's got these kind of other kind of creepy sides to it. Is that making sense or no? See,
That appears to contradict.
What's that?
But it just appears to contradict what went before.
In what way?
In the sense of if it can't deal with uncertainty, yet you're coming back around and saying that certainty is subjective, and so it must have a degree of uncertainty within it.
Okay, I try it this way.
Okay.
Say, uncertainty implies that you can't make a prediction. Okay? Whereas certainty is uncertain in the sense it's not static, but you can predict.
In an uncertain way.
No, in a fairly certain way.
There's a whole range of degree in that, isn't there?
Yes, but it's a range of degree, which is to say that it may not be the same answer, but you could guess within a certain range what could be the next step. If I'm going like this, you know the next situation is me going like that if I continue in that movement. Because the system that you have tells you more than likely, unless there's some intervention that happened and I decide to stop or the bomb drops on my head or something, I'm going to go in that direction. You can make your prediction. And that the whole social environment is based on that prediction is key. So another way of putting it is that you're allowed to class jump, but you can't jump off the earth. Although if you were the person who parachuted the other day, you could jump off the earth. Anyway, is that becoming clearer?
But you've gone through a number of different stages here, haven't you?
Yes.
So in each of those stages, you're building in just a little bit of uncertainty, which what
No,
happens
I'm
to that?
building in movement.
Well, lack of certainty.
No.
Not certainty.
Okay, let me put it like this. Remember what you were here last week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about doubt.
Yes.
Okay, Cartesian doubt. Just do this.
You're never going to get to Abraham, right?
We are going to get to Abraham. Good old Cartesian doubt.
for, what's his face, for Descartes. For Descartes, he's saying that doubt doesn't mean that you don't agree, like as in I'm doubting what you're saying. Doubt is the platform of certainty. It's a positive, not a negative, juggly thing. God, that's just sad. Okay. Wow. I never thought.
I like that.
Yeah, in fact, let's get rid of that part of the tape right now. In other words, I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. Where the sum, the full picture becomes who I am, the whole package, is able to happen because change is at the base, change meaning a positivity, which is certainty. So certainty is not meaning absolute. If I say I'm certain of something, that implies the same thing as I doubt what you're saying. Those two forms of certain versus doubt has to go off on a ship somewhere and drown. Because neither of those two types is what's being used here. So certainty in this context is like mathematical probability. Okay? So it's not static, but you can still figure it out. So another way of looking at it, like let's say you look at Mark Rothko's work, which I don't have any images of it. Yeah, just think of Mark Rothko, just follow me. How come it works? One of the arguments that one could use is it's not like he thought to himself, I must put this one piece of black like this, and the next one is definitely got to go here. Instead, he's playing with how they work together so that it creates a whole picture that isn't each one like a paint by numbers, so it's not certain at that level, but that it coheres together, creates this platform called certainty. It's not that his paintings are uncertain. It's not that they're in any way relativistic or in, I just thought I'd throw this cover on, not that one. It's much, it's very specifically open-ended in a very thought-through way. Does that make sense? So that's certainty. And that form of certainty is what becomes the basis of modern truth. So modernity is based on that kind of reality. Whereas postmodernity is based on uncertainty, but again, not the kind of uncertainty where you just go, well, I can't make. It's not. Postmodernism's uncertainty isn't like I can't make up my mind. I want to go here, no, I want to go there, no, I want to. That's not uncertainty. Uncertainty in postmodern is a whole other ballgame, which we're not going to get into, okay? Because I am going to go to Abraham now, okay? But are there any other small questions? Great. Okay.
Phew.
Okay. So Abraham, I'm going to put this up in a second. I just want to write this on for a second. Teleological suspension of the atom. And now we fall on our swords. Okay. Remember I said that you should do a book review? Probably you should do Trembling. What is it called? Fear and Trembling. This will clear it all up. It's 60 pages long. What is teleology? The unfolding. If you suspend the unfolding, by which is not meant hang it from the ceiling, if you suspend it, that is to say, put it out of time, get rid of it for just a moment, just an instant, then Abraham's position about killing the son or not, at least can circumvent the wrath of you saying, sorry, that's just so wrong, Abraham. What Kierkegaard is arguing in this book, and one of the reasons I wanted to look at it, is because this is the basis of being an artist. Try and look at it from a secular point of view, not a we're all going to become religious people. I mean, religious people, whatever.
what he's saying is that in order for you to be an artist, well, he doesn't put it like this. I'm translating this for you. I'm your Rosetta Stone on this one. For you to be an artist, you must learn how to submit. You must learn submission, but it's a very particular kind of submission. Choose your master well. A, you choose your master, that's the first thing. B, choose well. And art is the master. I'm just going to throw this into, I'll fill in all the blanks in a second. You must know at 4 in the morning that you must go down on your knees, or whatever, however you want to visualize it, and become wholly taken over by art. If you don't, you will not become an artist. You will just be an interesting, technically, reasonably good talent. You'll be talented. To be an artist, according to Kierkegaard, I'm not saying you agree with this. You must understand what it is to be driven to the point of submitting on bended knee to the glory of the gutter. You must understand dirt and filth and cruelty and all these crummy things that we don't want to look at. And if you don't do that, if you don't give yourself over to that, whatever that means to you and however you want to do it, you ain't going to get there, period. That's what he's saying. He's saying that you have to have this thing, what he calls faith. But in fact, what this is the understanding of the bended knee. It's a very specific thing. You must understand how you will be sublated into the picture. Just like that water into coffee. You must see what happens. So his argument around Abraham, I'm now going to attempt, I've been shown to do this. I'm going to call this. Yeah, I don't know how to make a big screen on this, so sorry. Anybody does know, don't hold back. Anybody know how to make this the document
The
full
bottom
screen?
thing, hold it down.
The bottom thing.
Of the trash bag, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but how do I get rid of this?
View full screen, so 3 across.
What? Here?
View straight at the top. And then but it's smaller now.
Okay, well, tough. Can you see it, or is it too little? Can you not see it?
This is
You can fix it says 125%, you can.
Oh, very good. Very good. How's that? Is that better? Yeah. Okay, now you see it was German. Might not need to do that. Oops. Okay, let's just do that here. So what he says, now I put this up here so you can see, I'll put this on the Moodle or whatever, but this is anything you need to read is going to be able to be found online. That's the first thing. And the whole of Fear and Trembling is online. It's static right now. Okay, obviously this is Can you still read that? Okay, so you go there. This is where this is from. Okay, now I will also, like I said, I can always send it around to you. Heaven's sakes. Where's the, maybe let's go over this way. Okay, well, anyway, you just have to, and now it's annoying me. How do I get it to go that way? Anybody know how to get it to where it is?
Jeremy, if you could click on the paragraph and then just press right.
Or just keeping
Or
it as
just
small as possible.
zoom out, yeah.
Go back on. Then to that percentage.
Yes,
So text.
there, there.
No, down the bottom page. Where
Oh. How's that? Is that better? Ish? Okay. What he argues, he says it wasn't ethically defensible for Abraham to actually think this made sense. To take his only son and kill him. Because if he thought to himself, well, I'm going to take the son so far, and then surely God or somebody will intervene and this will all be okay, then he wouldn't really have been carrying out the full extent of what needed to go on. That he needed to completely give himself in this form of Isaac. I want to read you a couple things. The first thing I want to draw to your attention is this part here. It says, what Tarquinius Superbus spoke to his son, I should say, spoke in his garden here. What Tarquinius Superbus spoke in his garden with the poppies was understood by his son, but not the messenger. Okay, now what that is, does anybody know that myth? Tarquinius myth? Okay, great. Okay, another thing you can do on your spare time is read some of these myths. It's really quite badly. I'm so sorry I can't really say that well. Tarquinius was a really nasty emperor, and he decided that he wanted to kill everybody in a certain city. So he sent a messenger to tell his son what his plans were. But he didn't tell the son what he was really going to say, and he didn't tell the messenger what he was going to say. And what happened was the messenger was told by Tarquinius to knock off the heads of the tallest poppy, to take a knife or a sword and cut off the head of the poppy. And the messenger said, I don't understand what this message is, but here's what I got to do. So here, I'm cutting off the head of the poppy. And from that, the son realized everybody gets killed. Okay. It would have been really bad if he had deduced it wrong. Now everybody gets killed. Now I want you to keep all the other ones, the shorter ones. Yeah, but so the point that he's starting here is that the message, most people understood art and still understand art to some day as that I was saying before, that artists embody the message, as it were. And what's his face? What Kierkegaard is saying is that no. You are the inheritor of what comes next. And you must produce. And in order to produce, you must understand how information gets passed. You must understand, in this case, the sublation thing I just lost out on, in order to go forward. And so he wants to maintain that discussion via this little comment. Okay. Now he signs his book, Johannes de Silencio, 1843. So they're all writing basically around the same time. Oh, I meant to tell you, there's another guy named, I don't remember again. Anyway. Okay. So he starts like so many philosophers explaining why his work will never be loved, and he's hated, and, and all this, and it goes on. Okay. He says here's where we need to see this a little bit here. He says, in our time, nobody is content to stop with faith, but wants to go further. Now, faith, like I said, is the knowing that you don't know. And that is what you're surrendering to. That is, it's knowing that you don't know. And that in not knowing, that is what is going to make you create. It's the not knowing, not the knowing. It's the not knowing of something, not the understanding of something, except understanding as in knowledge. So when I say it's the not knowing
rather than the knowing that allows you to go forward. You must put your faith in not knowing, not space knowing. Did you get that? Okay, so not knowing, the immediate, the not, the blank, the doubt. It's the not knowing that you must surrender to. But it's a very particular form of not knowing. It's not the not knowing, right?
This is what you're saying or what he's saying?
What Kierkegaard's saying. I'm also saying this, but I'm at the moment Kierkegaard. I'm shape-shifting. Good. Okay, so what Kierkegaard is saying is that remembering the dialectic, what is the opposite of not knowing? Not knowing. Okay, what is the opposite of knowing? Not knowing. That's probably a lot easier. Okay, let's just start with that. You start with the not knowing, but that not knowing is linked to knowing. They're inseparable. It's just that if you start with the knowing, you're not going to get very far, and you're certainly not going to be an artist. You have to start with the not knowing. And you have to put your faith in the not knowing. And you have to put your faith not only in the not knowing of knowledge, it has to be in relationship to knowledge, not in relationship to, I don't know what, singing or something. It has to be in relationship to knowledge. That whole long sorted thing I showed you earlier. So we're not talking about common sense. We're not talking about intuition in the lay sense of will I have or opinion. We're talking about knowledge that is not knowing knowledge. Questions about this? Because this is kind of important.
So that's not the typical understanding of knowledge.
That's not the typical understanding. That's the Hegelian understanding that has been taken up.
Confusion.
Try not to let this be confused. This is why we have to be very clear as mud here, okay? We have to try and be as clear as possible. So not knowing doesn't mean you're walking around like a lunatic going, okay, right? That's not the not knowing. The not knowing means you put your faith in the fact that you will submit to the fact that you don't know. And you will use that as your guide, as long as you realize that the guide of not knowing is a system of some sort. You just don't know what the system is.
And you can't know the system.
And you can never know what the system is. And if you try to know what the system is, you'll screw it up.
Because it's what not knowledge.
See? It's not as crazy as you thought. Exactly right. So, are we sort of there? So we get past the very first page of the book. Okay? So the not knowing is your jumping off point. But it's not any old not knowing. It's the not knowing which is on the other side of knowledge, the dark side. The dark side of knowledge. That's the basis of
Why
the
the dark side?
I was waiting for someone to ask me that. More fun. Think about it. The roles are so much more interesting here in the movies. We were talking about cruelty. We were talking about rape, violence, horrible, horrible things.
As some expressions of it, but just not knowing is in the same realm.
It's not knowing is cruel.
Being lost.
Is that?
Always.
We don't know that.
To allow to put yourself in a position of not knowing means, on the one hand, according to Kierkegaard, and probably not just Kierkegaard, you are kind of disregarding all those who's around you. Because people might be relying on you to do X, Y, and Z. And if your star is guided by the not knowing as opposed to by the knowing, that's a bit of a problem for those around you, and the responsibility factor is a problem. And so the first part of not knowing, in the knowledge sense, okay, is that you can be cruel. And not only can you be cruel, but you will be cruel. It's not even a question of, oh, it might be cruel, it might not be cruel. It was cruel that he did not tell Sarah, or for that matter, Isaac, that he planned to kill him. So he wants to be very, now later on when we get to leotard, spelled L-Y-O, not as an outfit that you wear on your bottom down, not leotard like in ballet, but leotard is L-Y-O-T-A-R-D. He makes the argument that in order to love, you must know how to hide. And that a person who doesn't know how to hide doesn't know how to love. Now that's a very weird, totally different view of love than this kind of, group hugs type thing.
I don't understand.
Okay, don't worry, we're not going to go there. Okay, what we're going to go here is that hopefully by the end of tonight, it'll become, marginally clearer. I don't want to say it.
I was thrown by the dark idea, as though it's in the darkness that the truth is, or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's only part of the truth.
Well, that's the abstract form of the truth. I mean, the fully formed form of the truth requires knowledge.
Yeah, but those things, say rape and murder are so judgment laden that they get in the way of the not knowing of the truth.
Are they judgment laden? I don't know. If someone
Nobody goes around saying, hey, you know what, I like to rape and murder people.
and pillage and so on. Yeah, but that's not a judgment. If you have an issue with rape, I don't think that's a motive. That might be different. Okay, but no, what it's saying here is like for example, let's bring in God, just for a moment. I mean, I say this very respectfully to God and to anybody who's religious, but about God or gods or whatever God you have. But God does have a tendency to be incredibly bipolar, you have to admit. It's rain, it's murder, and it's famine, and great, and then sadness. And, it's like really. There was a hilarious paper in the U.S. called The Onion. I remember you came across it. And The Onion basically did a whole expose on God, and it was really very funny because it was like, how do you explain, concentration camps, Rwanda, murder? How do you explain this? Well, you don't. You don't explain it. But part of the argument, as it were, is coming back into the Kierkegaard realm. Not the realm of, God works in mysterious ways. Not that part of the realm. The realm that says you gotta get your head around this thing called cruelty. Not that it's a good thing, not that it's a bad thing, although obviously it's a bad thing, so clearly in a lot of ways, probably every way. But that good and bad don't belong in this comment. There's something else that's going on. That's not to say that you can't say that something isn't good or something isn't bad. Like I was saying at the outset, I, stroke Adorno, want to say fascism is bad, period. I don't care what country it's in. I think that women who die with their husbands because they're forced to die, I don't like that. I think it's a bad thing. I have issues with that. That poor child who ends up in Birmingham, that's fantastic. That's very bizarre. I think, I've never heard of Birmingham before. I say this really with love. And now everything's happening in Birmingham. It's so exciting. But anyway, she had the right to fight for the right for girls to have education, get shot in the head. Okay. Now, that was a tangent, sorry. But what I'm saying here is that it's not so much that you have to be prepared to go to the wall. It's that you have to know that the wall includes cruelty, bad blood, this kind of thing. That it's not just enough to say that the other side of knowledge is not knowledge. The other side of knowledge is this swamp of grossness, in part. I mean, you can have on the other side of knowledge, let's say, nice things too, but
which could be just as threatening.
Yes. All I'm saying is that you just need to get a sense of how cruelty is functioning as a feature of being an artist. Now, I'm not saying everybody should go out now and be cruel to an ant or an animal or something. It's like that. No. Although there are artists that Herman Nietzsche, for example, who's into like cutting cows and wallowing in the blood and whatever it is. It's ridiculous. I don't consider that art. I think it's just trash. I think he should be jailed. Because, like, you know, that's my view, but not that I have an opinion, but I just, you know.
That much.
But I'm just saying that he's talking about what is it that makes the Hermann Nietzsche type character, let's say, unethical. But the Abraham thing, where he's going to murder his son, ethical. And he says, in order to understand that, you have to understand how the teleological suspension of the ethical operates. A big thing I wrote on the board earlier. So he says, various things, he says that in our time, nobody's content to stop with faith, because faith is what we're talking about here, but wants to go further to knowledge, like the Enlightenment in the narrow sense of positivity, of empiricism, of the empirical social science. He wants to say that the problem is people think that that's progress. And he's saying it's not progress. It would perhaps be rash to ask where these people are going. But it is surely a sign of breeding and culture for me to assume that everyone has faith. For otherwise it would be queer for them to be going further. And queer, obviously, is an old term. In those old days, it was different. Then faith was a task for a whole lifetime, because it was assumed that dexterity in faith is not acquired in a few days or weeks. When the tried oldster drew near to his last hour, having fought the good fight and kept the faith, his heart was still young enough not to have forgotten that fear and trembling which chastened the youth, which the man indeed held in check, but which no man quite outgrows, or in fact, he's saying should outgrow. Except as he might succeed at the earliest opportunity in going further, that is to say, in giving up your fear and trembling. See, it's a fine line. If you tremble and fear too much, you're not going to get anything done. If you don't have any fear and trembling, you're also not going to get anything done. It's pretty much what's happening here. So he says here, the present writer is nothing of a philosopher. So, okay, that's like this beyond false modesty is irritating. He has not understood the system, does not know whether it actually exists, whether it is completed. Already he has enough for his weak head in the thought of what a prodigious head everybody in our day must have, since everybody has such a prodigious thought. It's talking about science, talking about the Enlightenment. Even though one were capable of converting the whole content of faith into the form of a concept, I hate you, Hegel, particularly, let's say, his comment on Hegel, it does not follow that one has adequately conceived faith and understands how one got into it or how one gets into one. The present writer is nothing of a Hegelian. He is a poetic act elegante. Sorry, an amateur writer who neither writes the system nor promises of the system, who neither subscribes to the system nor subscribes anything to it. He writes because for him it is a luxury. He is an artist because for him it is a luxury which becomes the more agreeable and more evident. The fewer there are who buy and read what he writes is fine with him. He can easily foresee that his faith in an age when passion has been obliterated in favor of learning, in favor of science in that scientific, dull, dragged, horrible sense, in an age when the author who wants to have readers must take care to write in such a way that the book can easily be perused during the afternoon nap. No bitterness there. And take care to fashion his outward deportment and likeness to the picture of that polite young gardener in the advertisement sheet, who with hat in hand and with a good certificate from the place where he last served, recommends himself to his steam carpet. He foresees his fate, that he will entirely be ignored, he meaning Kierkegaard. He meaning anyone who is an artist who gives up the quest of, let's say, empiricism. He has a presentiment of the dreadful event, but a jealous criticism will many a time let him feel the birch. He trembles at the still more dreadful thought that one or another enterprising scribe, a gulpter of paragraphs, who to rescue learning is always willing to do with other people's writing what Prof, to preserve good taste, magnanimously resolved to do with a book called the destruction of the human race. So he's saying this is what's at stake. If you don't become an artist, by which he means the dark side, that is, he will slice the author into paragraphs and will do it with the same inflexibility as the man who is in the interest of the sciences of punctuation divided his discourse by counting the words so that there were 50 words for a period and 35 for a semicolon. You see where he's going with this? Or is it? I prostrate myself with the profoundest deference before every systematic bag peerer at the custom house protesting, this is not the system. The Enlightenment is not really the system. What I'm talking about, me, Silencio, in fact he calls himself Silencio because nobody can hear him. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the system by which is this cut and dry position where you start from the knowledge. I call down every blessing upon the system, upon the Danish shareholders in this omnibus. For a tower it is hardly likely to become. I wish them all and sundry good luck and all prosperity. Just so we're on the same page. Does anybody want to give a translation of that? Anyone want to try? Anna? How? Everybody look at your shoes quickly.
Is he saying,
Where that was
is it in the word luxury? Is he saying that we have to make art because we just really want to, and the minute we bring anything else into it, that's not what we're doing?
He's saying, I think what I heard you say, I'm going to paraphrase it and tell me if that's what you said. What he's saying is that it's a luxury to be an artist. But that luxury is a necessity if you want to save the human race.
Right.
And to be an artist means you must understand how knowledge operates in the not knowledge terrain.
So you must understand the knowledge but not subscribe to it.
No, you don't have to understand it at all. You have to engage. You have to have the faith that the way in which you're incorporated into the fear of what's going to happen will take you where you need to go, wherever that is.
And in that way you're on the dark side because
Yes.
you're allowing that journey to happen come what may. And the minute
Yes.
you try and mediate that journey, you're not doing it.
So you have the faith is a faith in knowledge, but not a system of knowledge. So it's that you.
Sort of, no. All
I mean,
knowledge has a system, but it's not the system.
that you want. It's
Well,
a
it's not the
faith.
system of the empirical notion where a fact has no other side, where a fact is absolute. So to understand truth as a fact that is always subjective is key. And once you can do that, then the next step is another step away from that, because that's Hegel. He's saying you got to even get further away from Hegel. You've got to understand that you start at the not knowing, and you're guided by the not knowing. Remember when I said that something could be, I just love this thing. That when you have the sublated moment, when things can be sublated, so you have dry, you have not dry. And if the not dry gets sublated into dry, it becomes, what? Super dry. Yes, it becomes big dry. Okay? And big dry comes back around and gets mean to these sides. However, if dry becomes sublated into not dry, what does it become? Super not dry. We're just going to talk about that. Call it wet. Okay. You're not going to go around to some laundromat and go, yes, I would like to have it super not dry. But you can have fun with this, actually. Mental. But so So for example, let's say we have dirty, sexual, I don't know, what's the word, fetish, S&M. That's on the one side. And on the other side, we have Mary Poppins.
Bambi.
What's that?
Bambi.
Bambi's always a good one. You know, I don't know, whatever. There are no.
Dorothy.
Dorothy's very good. Okay, so we could sublate this into this group, because we know that Mary Poppins, if she takes off her glasses, is probably kind of an interesting, I mean, I don't mean anybody pleasant. If she does something else. We know that she has all this inside, as it were, what Bambi does. Bambi starts eating the grass and smoking instead. Okay, he could conceivably do that, he or she could do that. But what's his face is saying is that this has to be sublated this way. And that what comes out, what drives the system, what drives the art, what drives the knowledge is that this remains alive somehow. This is the key. Now, I put it in this way, but he's talking about murdering his son. So he gets into that, okay, is that so one sublation can go one way, one sublation can go the other way. You can either become sort of science in the empiricist sense, or you can become science in the art sense. And in fact, Foucault later on will say that this is called ars erotica, not ars. Ars erotica. In fact, I actually wrote an essay to a very well-known publishing house, and they were so upset when I did this. They kept saying, you know, we can't publish this. And I was like, it's Latin. And they thought that I had written the wrong word. And this is ars scientifica. And often science is seen to only be on this side, when in fact, he's saying that it should be over here. Science, knowledge, scientia, the old word for knowledge. Okay, yeah? Good, isn't it? Okay, we'll go back to Abraham as a child. Okay. I just love this. Okay. Ready? Are you okay with this? Okay, so he starts off with his prelude, and he goes to, I asked you to read the Problemata 1. The first Problemata is, you know, wasn't ethically appropriate for him to hide this, to keep it a secret. Was this right? So his first question, he gives you the story. And you'll find when you read this, that he tells the story about 20 different times, in about 20 different ways, the same story. Once upon a time, there was a man who as a child had heard the beautiful story about how God tempted Abraham and how he endured temptation, kept the faith, and a second time received again a son contrary to his expectation. Sad backstory here. When the child became older, he read the same story with even greater admiration. For life had separated what was united in pious simplicity of the child. The older he became, the more frequently his mind reverted to that story. His enthusiasm became greater and greater, and yet he was less and less able to understand the story. At last, in his interest for that, he forgot everything else. The soul had only one wish, to see Abraham, one longing to have been witness to that event. Which is kind of quite pertinent. His desire was not to behold the beautiful countries of the Orient, or the earthly glory of the promised land, or that God-fearing couple whose old age God had blessed, or the venerable figure of the aged patriarch, or the vigorous young manhood of Isaac whom God had bestowed upon Abraham. He saw no reason why the same thing might not have taken place on a barren heath in Denmark. His yearning was to accompany them on a 3 days' journey, when Abraham rode with sorrow before him, and with Isaac by his side. His only wish was to be present at the time when Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw Mount Moriah far off, at the the time when he left the asses behind and went alone with Isaac up into the mountain. For what his mind was intent upon was not the ingenious web of imagination, but the shudder of a thought. For what his mind was intent upon was not the ingenious web of imagination, but the shudder of a thought. That man was not a thinker. He felt no need of getting beyond faith. He deemed it the most glorious thing to be remembered as the father of it, as an enviable lot to possess it, even though no one else were to know it. Okay, now, so that sets the scene. So the first thing he basically says, he goes again, he starts telling the story again. It was early in the morning, Abraham arose 3 times. He had the asses saddled, left his tent and also. They rode in silence for 3 days. On the morning of the 4th day, Abraham said never a word, but he lifted up his eye and saw Mount Moriah afar off. He left the young men behind and went on alone with Isaac behind him up the mountain. But Abraham said to himself, I will not conceal from Isaac whither this course leads him. He stood still, he laid his hand upon the head of Isaac in benediction, and Isaac bowed to receive the blessing, and Abraham's face was fatherliness. His look was mild, his speech encouraging, but Isaac was unable to understand him. His soul could not be exalted. He embraced Abraham's knees. He fell at his feet imploringly. He begged for his young life, for the fair hope of his future. He called to mind the joy in Abraham's house. He called to mind the sorrow and the loneliness. Then Abraham lifted up the boy. He walked with him by his side, and his talk was full of comfort and exhortation. But Isaac could not understand him. He climbed Mount Moriah, but Isaac understood him not. Then for an instant he turned away from him. And when Isaac again saw Abraham's face, it was changed. His glance was wild. His form was hard. He seized Isaac by the throat. He threw him to the ground and said, Stupid boy, do you then suppose I am your father? I am an idolater. Dost thou suppose that this is God's bidding? No, it's my desire. Isaac trembled and cried out in terror, O God in heaven, have compassion upon me. God of Abraham, have compassion upon me. If I have no father on earth, be thou my father. But Abraham in a low voice said to himself, O Lord in heaven, I thank thee. After all, it is better for him to believe that I am a monster rather than that he should lose faith in thee. When the child must be weaned, his mother blackens her breast. It would indeed be a shame that the breast looked delicious and the child must not have it. So the child believes that the breast has changed, that the mother is the same. Her glance is as loving and tender as ever. Happy the person who has no need of more dreadful expedients for weaning a child. And then he tells the story again. It was early in the morning. And yet he goes off again. And he ends by saying, Isaac throve as before, but Abraham's eyes darkened, and he knew joy no more. When the child has grown big and must be weaned, the mother virginally hides her breast, so that the child has no more a mother. Happy the child who does not in another way lose its mother. And then he says it again. It was early in the morning. We had the same thing. It was quiet evening. And then he goes again. Often he rode his lonely way, but he found no rest. He could not comprehend it was a sin to be willing to offer to God the best thing he possessed, that for which he would many times have given his own life. And if it was a sin, if he had not loved Isaac as he did, and he could not understand that it might be forgiven, for what sin could be more dreadful? When a child must be weaned, the mother too is not without sorrow at the thought that she and the child are separated more and more, that the child which first lay under her heart and later reposed on her breast will be so near to her no more. So they mourn together for the brief period of mourning. Happy the person who has kept the child as near and needed not to sorrow anymore. And then he tells the story again. But Abraham prepared everything for the sacrifice, calmly and quietly. But when he turned and drew the knife, Isaac saw that his left hand was clenched in despair, that a tremor passed through his body. But Abraham still drew the knife. Then they returned home again, and Sarah hastened to meet them, but Isaac had lost his faith. No word of this had ever been spoken to the world, and Isaac never talked to anyone about what he had seen, and Abraham did not suspect that anyone had seen it. When a child must be weaned, the mother has stronger food in readiness, lest the child should perish. Happy the person who has the stronger food in readiness. Thus, and in many like ways, the man of whom we are speaking thought concerning this event. Every time he returned home after wandering up to Mount Moriah, he sank down with a weariness. He folded his hands and said, "No one is so great as Abraham, who is capable of understanding him." And then we go down. I'm just going to skip over a little bit so we can. So what Kierkegaard starts to do is start to try and figure out what is at stake here. Now, before I get to the last bit of it, I'm sorry. Okay. So now he says, all right, here's the problem. Abraham knows this is wrong, and he tries different solutions. One solution he figures, well, if I present it as though I'm a monster, then at least God will survive, and the child will go thinking I'm an idiot, and I'm a horrible person, this kind of thing. But if you notice, the repose is always about the mother's breast, and about nurturing, and about how one must learn this separation. Both the mother must learn it, and the child must learn it. And happy is the child who doesn't have to learn it by getting killed, by getting raped, by getting stoned, by, these terrible, terrible war things. But something has to happen, and it's cruel. This is the key here. It says, who gave strength to Abraham's arm? Who held his right hand up so it did not fall limp at his side? He who gazes at this becomes paralyzed. Who gave strength to Abraham's soul so that his eyes did not grow dim, so that he saw neither Isaac nor the ram? He who gazes at this becomes blind. And yet rare enough perhaps is the man who becomes paralyzed and blind. Still more rare, one who worthily recounts what happened. We all know it. It was only a trial. Now, then he goes into the problem. So I'm going to just let this lie with me. It's very heavy stuff. And he says, should life just be a series of horrible trials that you look back and go, wow, if I knew then what I know now, I would have that everything is a trial, everything is a trial. He's not saying that. He's saying that there's something about the way in which one must learn how one gives over to the dark side, as it were, without assuming that the dark side is evil. That the giving over to this thing called the dark side, calling it the dark side, yeah, if you don't call it the dark side, because the dark side is God. He's saying you give over to this dark side, which seems like it's doing a lot of evil, horrible things, but actually, if you were actually going to go out and do something evil because you wanted to do it, this is totally different. This is still dealing with knowledge and positivity. He's saying that instead it has to be brought into this so-called other side, this not side. It's the not side that lends itself to a very particular form of cruelty. It's a cruelty that requires you to hide, to create parameters, to create boundaries. But these aren't boundaries that are like those walls. These are ones that allow you to set up an identity, to set up your way forward. I'm not sure, what are you hearing here? So I'm not sure if I've lost you in the telling of the tale. Or are you just dead?
Is this where you start with objectives and those
Yes.
sorts of to protect yourself and to protect mankind?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the question is, can you have ethics that don't go over into the scientistic side, the utilitarian side, the side that will just be rules?
It's about, stepping on.
Can you have art? Or, different way of putting it, you must have, in order to have art, what's that? Good voice.
You must have art
And art will do?
to do with this ethical side to explore and to get into.
It's because art, yes, that's right. Because art, what does art do? It keeps the door open. It keeps the exit. It's the basis of the exit. It's the ground. But it's not an easy exit. You give up a lot to be here, actually. Not knowing where you're going to go with it or why. You just are here. It's a very specific move that you've made. But that's also why I say that to be this thing called the artist, you don't actually have to be enrolled in art school. Artists are pretty much everywhere, or anyway should be. This is the is and the ought thing. Okay, what do you hear? That's enough. I'm not going to read you any more Kierkegaard, or you're going to just collapse. You guys look so sad. Like, wow, it's just awful. Okay, you don't have to go to the dark side. How's that? Okay, it's really okay. It's like, I'm going to tell you a joke. I think this will help while you're gathering your thoughts. There was this guy who really wanted to understand life. And he had a great teacher. And the teacher said, whatever happens, always remember life is a fountain. And so he thought, wrote it down. Interesting. And he thought about it a lot. And as his life progressed, he became an accountant. He became everything he didn't want to be. He became boring in his own mind. And he remembered his teacher from way back when saying, don't ever forget, life is a fountain. And so he decided to really find out about this life as a fountain thing. And he went, that life is the dark side, like that. So he went, and he tried to find this old professor, and he found out that he was dying. He couldn't believe it. So he thought, well, before I go, I have to see him, but before he dies, I've really got to find out what this life as a fountain thing is. So he goes to, places where he sits with, monks, and he says, do you understand what this thing life is? And they go, life is a fountain, yes. Really interesting. And they would have long discussions, and time went by, years went by, and he wasn't happy with them, so he went to these mathematicians, and he said, do you have any idea what life is? And I do, figured out life is a fountain. It wasn't quite right. So then he realizes his teacher is dying, and he's got to get there and see him before he goes. He goes to the guy, and he gets to us, and he begs, please let me see him. He said, well, he's really quite ill. No, I have to see him before he goes. I've got to understand this life as a fountain thing. It's really bugging me. And he goes up to the guy, and the guy's lying there, and he can hardly see, doesn't remember him, And he says, teacher, 50 years ago, when I was in your class, you said life is a fountain, and I've spent my entire life trying to figure out what this means. And he said, what do you practice before you die? I'm sorry about this, but what does it mean? What does it mean? Guys, so we met 50 years ago. And he said, yes, 50 years ago. And you were one of my students. Yes, I was really anyway, what is life as a fountain? And you've gone to India, and you've gone to Mexico, and you've gone to the space centers, and you've gone everywhere with this question, life is a fountain. Yes, what does it mean? He goes, and nobody had an answer. Nobody had an answer. He goes, maybe life isn't a fountain. Okay, so, remember that, okay. So the dark side, you've just got to sort of, did that help you? You threw now the horribleness of the Kierkegaard story? Okay, that's probably enough for today. Are there any more questions? What does life as a fountain of your essay? Okay?